The Nintendo Switch is an absolutely fantastic console with plenty of games both for gamers and for collectors alike. However, much like pretty much every other console in existence, well, some games are starting to go out of print. In this video I'm going to look at a handful of fantastic games worth adding to your collection, worth playing, that, well, are starting to get a little bit expensive physically. Now, full disclaimer here, I'm using PAL, I'm not looking at limited run releases, I'm not looking at American imports, this is purely on UK PAL games. Of course, this isn't accounting for reprints. Pretty much any of these games could be reprinted at any time, and you probably could get a reprint via VGP for a little bit cheaper. Of course, I would not do this as an investment. Like I said, nearly all of these could get Switch 2 editions or what have you. For example, Hollow Knight, that was one that I initially had on this list. Pretty much straight away got a Switch 2 edition, prices started dropping. So expect reprints, but what I am picking here is games that are worth playing in whatever form, and you can probably get a better deal on some of these games on consoles like the PlayStation 5 or digitally. So without further ado, let's have a look at some of these fantastic games worth playing and might be worth picking up before it's too late. The first game is one that honestly is an absolute indie darling, and it's one that I was genuinely surprised was as expensive as it is on the Switch. This is again another one that is pretty cheap via the PlayStation consoles, and that title is Hades. Now, I picked this one up a few months ago and I felt it was fairly expensive at the time, but it is a fantastic game, and I have noticed since the release of Hades 2 this game has again jumped in price. I believe there is a Japanese version of this which is a little bit cheaper, but again import, and once you kind of go through that you're not really saving a huge amount. But if you want the PAL release of this thing is going to be increasing in value. It is one that I'm kind of hoping is going to get a reprint at some point, especially with Hades 2 being on the Switch 2. Maybe a Switch 2 version of it might drop the price a little bit, but as it stands at this point, it's an expensive one, and it's one that's really good as well, which is annoying. But yeah, this one, fantastic game, definitely worth picking up, but might want to go for a PlayStation version if you don't want to play the full amount. Another game that is an absolute indie darling, but again is increasing in price, and I have noticed this one go up and up and up. Stardew Valley. Now, I picked this one up a few years ago and it was roughly around the 20s, but now, I mean, CX on its own says 40. I have seen it in game for a little bit less, but obviously game is very hit and miss on what you can get. It is a fan gamer release, so they could potentially have a few discounts here and there if they reprint it. They do tend to have random reprints, but it's one of those games that is fantastic. This is one of the games that I just love playing on the Nintendo Switch because it's just so pick up and play. You can just sink a few hours here and there. It is a really enjoyable one. It's one of those indie games that is just absolutely beloved. I can't think of many people who don't like this game, but strangely enough it is fairly expensive. I believe it's also fairly expensive on the PlayStation ones. I could be wrong, but yeah, on the Nintendo Switch, unless you strike gold with a copy in game or on Amazon, this one's gonna be about £40 or so, up from about 20. Should this stop getting a reprint, it's gonna go up. So yeah, fantastic one, dirt cheap digitally, but I think if you want a collection physically, yeah, getting more and more expensive. Another one that I recently picked up, and I saw the price difference between what I picked it up and the CEX price. There's a bit of a difference here. Now, this is one that I feel has went up in price over the last few years. It's a bit of an older release, but I actually picked up the American copy for a little bit cheaper. Subnautica and Subnautica Below Zero, and the reason why, Subnautica 2, that's just came out. Of course, it's a dual pack as well, so it's also one that's a little bit harder to find. It's just one of those ones, because the second game's out, much like Hades, unless a reprint happens, this thing is going to go up and up, annoyingly. And it's kind of at the point, it's like, will they bother to do a reprint of it? Because it's probably easy to put out Subnautica 2 because that's new and flashy and a brand new game. I don't know. It's one of those ones where it's kind of, I could see it going either way, but if you want to have the collection, I don't know if Subnautica 2 even has a physical release announced at this point. I'm going to assume no. But yeah, as soon as Subnautica 2 comes out, I think this one's going to go up and up. It has gone up since I bought it a few weeks ago. So yeah, it's an awkward one. So yeah, I think this one, maybe pick it up sooner rather than later if you want to have the collection. If not, I mean, you can probably just play the second game, I can imagine, without playing this one. It's just, if you want a full collection, yeah. Next up is one of Nintendo's, I wouldn't say darlings, but it's one of Nintendo's releases that they hyped up, got released, disappeared pretty much instantly, and honestly was one of my favourite games of that particular year. Emio, the Smiling Man Famicom Detective Club. Now, we didn't get the Famicom Detective Club physical release that came out a while ago, but we did get Emio, the Smiling Man, and this is one where they hyped it up as a kind of like a horror game. People that was like, oh, it's Famicom Detective Club. It came out, I don't really think anybody talked about it, and it just kind of stuck. It never went into like a discount, it just kind of stuck where it was. Of course, Nintendo games don't drop easily. But I rarely see it. It's not one I see too often. And I think it's one that, should the reprint stop, this thing's going to be one of the more desirable titles. This is going to be kind of like, I would argue, same level as stuff like Chibi Robo for the GameCube, where it's like, oh, it's one of those Nintendo releases where it's not one of their big releases, it's one of their like kind of side releases. But I think over time, it's going to be one of those ones where people look back on the Switch and go, oh yeah, I want all the Switch best games. This is considered one of the better games. Oh, it's harder to find because it had a low print run and not many people bought it. It's going to be an awkward one to pick up. So I love this one. I really enjoyed it. I do like visual novel games if I can get into them. So this is one that I would recommend picking up if you certainly can see it and want to try it out. Another one, again, this is another one that came and went, and I wanted to put a lot of this franchise on here because I feel like that all of them will increase in price over time. But for now, Legends of Nayuta Boundless Trails. Now this is a spin-off for the Trails franchise, which already, I know in America, is a fairly expensive one. Over here, I don't think it's really had the same success. I think it's still a niche JRPG which is beloved by the fans, but it's not one that I kind of see a lot of people rushing out to buy. You can still pick up a lot of the titles from CEX for about £30 each, but I think it's one of those ones where when people look back and they want to get all of the good Switch games, a lot of the Trails games will be on there. I just don't know if this will ever get a reprint though, because this one, again, this came out and just kind of came and went very fast. This one I saw jumped up in price very quickly, and it only came out maybe a year or two ago. I think it actually came out at the same time as Emio the Smiling Man. So yeah, it's an interesting one where it kind of came and went, and like not many people kind of hyped it up, and yeah, it's a good game. It's another installment into the Trails franchise, which was a spin-off, so it's not like super popular. Yeah, it's one of those ones where I'm kind of like, if you're interested in the Trails franchise, if you want JRPGs, this is one to keep an eye out for because it has steadily increased over the last year or two since release. The next one is another one of Nintendo's more long-running franchises, but I think it's always kind of been a little bit more of a niche one. I think this generation, this Switch generation, has been a big push for it, and that is Pikmin. And the one I'm going to talk about is Pikmin 1 and 2. I could argue Pikmin 3 as well, but I've heard again potentially Switch 2 releases. Pikmin 1 and 2, well, it's Pikmin 1 and 2, it's the original games put onto a Switch cartridge. These games have been released a few times at this point. We had Pikmin 1 and 2 on the GameCube. I think Pikmin 1's about 15, I think Pikmin 2 is about 40 on GameCube. The Wii ones, the Wii Play, or where I think it's like Wii Motion Play or something like that. Again, Pikmin 2 a bit more expensive. So yeah, another re-release of this was welcome. But again, this is another one that kind of came out and kind of was like lost in the shuffle. People were like, oh, it's another like kind of like a re-release. And again, it kind of, I don't see it often, But again, it was like 20 odd pounds when it came out, but I think it's like creeping up to about 40, 50 pounds now, so yeah. And it's a bit of an annoying one because, I mean, you don't need these to play Pikmin 4, but it's kind of nice to have in the collection. It's one of these ones where I keep seeing a lot of these games where it's like, oh yeah, they're part of another thing to complete a collection. And yeah, not seeing the re-release of this one anytime soon, not seeing a reprint of this one anytime soon. Could be harder to get. Another franchise that is still pretty popular, and I'm actually quite surprised at how popular this one is, and that is Danganronpa. Now, these were Vita games, and they still hold up value pretty okay on the Vita. But we got Danganronpa Decadence, which I believe is Danganronpa, Danganronpa 2, Danganronpa 3, and a spin-off. So you're getting 4 Danganronpa games in here. This game was one when I started collecting Nintendo Switch a few years ago. It was very straight away on my list. Again, this is another one where I rarely see it in CEXs. I believe it's fairly expensive. But the franchise is still popular. It's one of those ones where I kind of was just like, oh yeah, this was popular like when I got into like anime like early 2010s, and then I was just like, oh, actually this game's still kind of like popular. It still gets brought up quite a lot in discussion. It's got a very dedicated fan base. Again, this is another one. It had a pretty low print run. I don't know many people who actually picked it up because it's a reissue of Vita games. I don't know, it's one of those ones where I kind of think this is going to explode in price, but it's slowly increasing. It's not like went insane, and I kind of think when people start looking back on the Nintendo Switch, it's going to be one of those ones where I think it's going to be, yeah, people are going to want it, people are going to want to try and pick this one up. 4 games, I mean, always a good shout when you get 4 games in one, isn't it? Now, the next one is an interesting one because I think this is going to have 2 different prices depending on what condition you get in. The new prices of these are going to skyrocket. The pre-owned ones, meh. So this is Bayonetta, but I'm also including Bayonetta 1 and 2. So this is advertised as Bayonetta and Bayonetta 2. However, Bayonetta, the first one, is a download code. So yeah, brand new, just getting Bayonetta is probably going to be a little bit more expensive than getting Bayonetta 2. You can get a physical of Bayonetta 1 via import, so that might drop prices a little bit, but again, it's another one that's a little bit niche as well. I mean, Bayonetta 3 is like dirt cheap, but Bayonetta 2 never really dropped too far. It's one of those ones I don't see new at all. So yeah, if you want Bayonetta 1, yeah, we're going to have to import it, or you're going to have to get a new expensive copy pre-owned. I think this is about £30 just for Bayonetta 2, so still pretty expensive, I would argue. But it's just another one, hasn't really dropped in price, bit of a niche series. I can see definitely being more expensive, especially the first one if this doesn't get a reprint. They haven't really looked at redoing it. I have heard Bayonetta 1 is getting a full-on PlayStation release again, because Nintendo own the rights for 2 and 3, but they don't own the 1 for 1 or something like that. I don't know. Again, if you want this thing complete, expect to start paying a bit more. The next one, actually I'll probably say the next 2 on this list. Again, these are games where they went so cheap, but then the price started going up. You can get these cheap on other consoles. So the first one is Suikoden 1 and 2. These games are expensive on the PlayStation 1. I think they have dropped with the re-release. The Switch one went down to about £20, but now I can't see it that cheap. Even brand new, it doesn't seem to be that low, and it hasn't been that low for a while. So it's one of those franchises which was niche at the time, ended up being absolutely beloved. I still consider Suikoden 2 to be one of the greatest JRPGs of all time. Certainly the best JRPG on the PlayStation 1. It's one of those ones that was absolutely niche for a long time, got popular, and then they did the re-release, and the re-release I think did okay, but then I think we started seeing discounted, and yeah, so I can't imagine this did like amazingly well, but I think this did well enough. I think there's a good chance this one could be a little bit harder to get, especially on the Nintendo Switch, because Switch tax, everything's a little bit more expensive. But this is certainly one I saw for very cheap for a long time, and no longer see cheap. Could go either way, but I think this is one that's still one to keep an eye on, just due to how historic and expensive the original OG versions are. This is one where maybe if you skip it, it could go either way. Again, another one, hugely popular, absolute fantastic game. Switch one's a little bit more niche, and that is NieR Automata, the End of Your Heart Edition, Nintendo Switch. I'm not sure how this one runs on the Switch 2. I've not played it yet, but this was one of those games that was considered a wonder port, that they managed to get this thing running on the Nintendo Switch. I was very much expecting a Switch 2 announcement. Never came. Again, this is one, I got this for like 15 quid a few years ago. I don't think I've seen it that cheap for a long time. At least not new anyway. It's a fantastic game. Not as good as the PlayStation version. Of course, it's got compromises for the Switch. I heard there was some problems getting it running on Switch 2. I heard though that I think this is one of those ones that was fixed. Could go either way again. It's starting to creep up. Its 10th anniversary is next year, however. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Switch 2 edition of this, but I'm genuinely surprised it hasn't been announced. Again, this was one could go either way. I think this is one where it could either be really expensive if it doesn't get a reissue, doesn't get a Switch 2 port, or it could just kind of drop off if a Switch 2 port does kind of end up coming. Buyer beware, I think, on this one. The next one is one where it's kind of came out a few times now. You can play this on other consoles in worse states. And it's one that, it's an older Switch titles, and I just don't see it getting another one, especially when there's a few more in this line, and that is Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. So we've got Hyrule Warriors, we had Age of Calamity, and we had the other one on the Switch 2, Age of Imprisonment I think it was called. So we've got more of them. This again, this is the best version of it. It came out on the Wii U, and it came out on the 3DS. I believe if you got the collector's editions of them, they're worth something, but I think the standard ones are fairly cheap. Obviously this has got all the DLC, all of the stuff from both the Wii U and the 3DS stuff. So it kind of came out, the Wii U got DLC, then they released the 3DS one, which got DLC, and then they released this, which has got I believe doesn't have DLC, but there's hundreds of hours in this. Fantastic game, I really enjoy going back to this one. It's one where it's never dropped in price, and it has slowly went up, and I think if you're trying to get a Wii U Switch collection, and I think if you're trying to get a Switch collection, I think could be harder to find down the line. Again, we're talking theoretically here, could get another Switch 2 port for all we know. It's so random in some of these ways that they're kind of just releasing these games just randomly, but I don't see this one getting another re-release at this point, but it's Nintendo, we don't know. I think this one could be harder to get. I don't think it's going to be massively expensive, but I think it's still going to be one that's going to be, I think once games start dropping in price, I think this is going to be one that's going to stay up in price. And the final one, now, full context, this has been recorded a few days after that Nintendo Direct. And the reason why this one I think is going to go up is this was about £20 I think originally, maybe 25. It's been a long time since I bought it because I bought it on launch. Don't see it often. The other games in the franchise are getting Switch 2 editions. This is going to have a Switch 2 upgrade path. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna the Golden Country. This is Torna the Golden Country, the DLC standalone game for Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Bit of a mouthful here. So this was released as DLC, but was also released as its own physical edition. So that Nintendo recently announced Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2 and 3. We also had X earlier in the year. Are all getting Switch 2 editions with upgrade paths. This is not getting another physical edition that we're aware of. So as far as I'm aware, I think this is more or less whatever's there is there. If you do have this edition though, it does have an upgrade path. So yeah, it's just overly confusing for the sake of being overly confusing. I kind of wish that they did this and they did Future Redeemed as its own physical Switch 2 one, because this is still 30 hours long. This is a full whack game. I don't think it's too expensive, but I think with Xenoblade getting another lease of life, a new one getting released, and all the Switch 2 ones, and then kind of seeing this isn't getting a re-release, I think this is one sooner rather than later. Sooner rather than later. Getting a fantastic full whack, full game on here, even though it's labelled as a DLC expansion. Don't know why I didn't get one. Like I said, 2 and 3 Future Redeemed, both 30 hours. I would have slapped both of them on a cart and released it personally, but hey, I think this is one, yeah, worth getting if you love Xenoblade. Fantastic addition to the franchise. Doesn't seem to be getting a reprint anytime soon. Annoying. So yeah, like I said, this is absolutely huge, pure speculation. I'm not going to say that these games are all definitely going to be expensive games in the future, but I think they're all worth picking up. I think if you're going for a Switch collection, especially if you're a new Switch collector, I think pretty much all of these are worth picking up and having in the collection. Like I said, these are ones I either rarely see, I've seen, they were cheap at one point and there's never seen them cheap again. I don't think they'll get reprints, but potentially they might. Like I said, this is all speculation. Don't go this as an investment, whatever you do. But if you like this, consider subscribing. Let me know any titles that you think are going to get quite expensive, especially more popular ones. We can just see limited run, anything's going to be expensive. But if you live in America and you're watching this as well, let me know, what have you seen for the prices for some of these games? Do you think there's a big discrepancy in America versus UK, England, pal? Let me know. And if you like this, leave a like, consider subscribing. If you didn't like it, dislike it. And I'll see you next time. We're going to have more Switch stuff, more GameCube, more Nintendo, more hunts, plenty more coming. See you there. Goodbye.